It's March 5th, 2026. Operation Epic Theory is 5 days old. The US and Israel are launching hundreds of strikes, and the IRGC is filling the sky over the Gulf with drones and missiles. Down on the water, it's a chaotic exchange of fire, but the most immediate threat to global trade is sitting quietly beneath the surface. Unconfirmed reports indicate Iranian forces have laid naval mines directly across the Strait of Hormuz. Here is the strange part about global shipping. Commercial tankers routinely sail straight into combat zones. They navigated these exact waters during the Iran-Iraq War. They pushed through the Red Sea despite constant Houthi attacks. If the freight payouts are high enough, shipping companies will take the risk. Based on historical precedent, traffic through the world's most vital oil chokepoint should have slowed, maybe rerouted slightly, but continued. Instead, it collapsed to absolute zero almost instantly. A coordinated series of phone calls from the Protection and Indemnity Clubs, or P&I clubs, headquartered in London's financial district, effectively paralyzed the strait. These mutual insurance associations cover the world's commercial shipping fleet, and overnight, every major P&I club unilaterally canceled all coverage for the Strait of Hormuz. They refused to underwrite a single transit. Risk assessment protocols closed the world's most critical choke point more effectively than a conventional naval blockade. To see how a few actuaries grounded thousands of ships, you have to look at the invisible shield that surrounds global trade. Every commercial vessel carries multiple overlapping layers of insurance. You have hull and machinery coverage for the physical ship, cargo insurance for what's inside, and standard liability for third-party damages like an oil spill or a crew injury. Sitting on top of all that is a highly specialized separate add-on called war risk insurance. It is purchased voyage by voyage, and it is explicitly required if you want financial protection against acts of terrorism, hostile state actions, or stray missile strikes. This schematic shows the raw financial exposure of a standard very large crude carrier. You have $100 million wrapped up in the hull alone, and another $150 million in the cargo hold. That is a combined $250 million of total exposure. Without that war risk policy in place, the ship owner is personally liable for every single penny. No shipping executive or corporate board will ever authorize sailing $250 million of entirely uninsured assets into an active combat zone. Before the conflict broke out, these war risk premiums were an afterthought. Passing through the strait cost roughly 0.25% of the ship's total value. On a voyage earning up to $10 million in freight revenue, that fee was essentially a rounding error. That cheap administrative fee suddenly became a crippling $15 million toll for a single voyage. This line graph tracks what happened to those premiums on March 5th. You can see the long flat line near zero, followed by a violent upward spike as costs hit 10% of the hull's value. And in some global markets, the panic drove prices even higher. Extreme outliers like South Korean shipping contracts saw their insurance premiums jump by 1,056%. The costs went from a minor operational expense to mathematically impossible overnight. The immediate result was a systemic chain reaction. Without affordable insurance, banks automatically refused to issue letters of credit against the cargo. Without those letters, port authorities physically block the tankers from docking. The entire logistical chain snaps. This balance scale illustrates the true asymmetry of the attack. Tehran spent maybe $10 million deploying localized threats. In return, they successfully manipulated the global risk market, removing $4.5 billion of daily oil flows. The Iranian military did not have the conventional naval strength to physically barricade the Strait of Hormuz on their own. They didn't have to. The global insurance industry stepped in and enforced the blockade for them. When the London underwriters walked away from the Gulf, the commercial market completely collapsed. To keep global energy supplies from freezing entirely, the United States government was forced into an emergency intervention. Washington invoked the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, essentially stepping in as the ultimate underwriter and guarantor for the commercial shipping industry. This creates a massive structural moral hazard. Private insurers now have a permanent incentive to abandon volatile markets early, perfectly aware that a panicked government will ultimately shoulder the financial risk. We have built a deeply flawed economic architecture. Hostile actors can execute cheap disruptions, while major corporations can take highly subsidized risks, and everyday taxpayers unknowingly foot the bill when things inevitably go wrong. The 2026 Hormuz shutdown was not an isolated event. It functioned as a highly successful beta test for a strategic playbook that is now completely public. This map illuminates how that playbook scales. If you look at highly concentrated maritime bottlenecks like the Suez Canal, the Strait of Malacca, or the Bosphorus, it is clear that any hostile actor bordering a narrow waterway now understands exactly where our leverage points are. These specific routes force massive, slow-moving vessels to navigate incredibly tight, shallow corridors. The geographic reality makes them an exceptionally easy target for cheap, land-based harassment. Parking a multi-billion-dollar naval destroyer next to a commercial tanker is no longer a guaranteed deterrent. You can protect the physical steel of a ship, but you ultimately cannot protect the financial viability of its voyage. Halting global trade does not require a massive blue-water naval fleet or complex military blockades. An adversary only needs to generate enough asymmetric pressure to spook the private risk assessors sitting in European office buildings. Maritime insurance has evolved into a strategic weapon, providing a lever of control over global trade that once required a blue-water navy to achieve.